The rain had just passed, leaving the woods slick with mud and smelling of coppery earth. Sheriff Dalton's boots sank with each step, and the only sound beside his breathing was a huff of his K9, Jasper. The German shepherd wasn't usually restless on night patrols, but tonight his nose jerked left, then right, then downward as though something buried deep was whispering to him. And then Jasper froze, eyes fixed on a half-buried rock at the edge of a clearing. He began clawing at it with an urgency that felt almost human, as if he knew something terrible waited beneath. If you enjoy stories told like this, consider staying connected. It helps me keep bringing them to you. The sirens were silent that night, replaced by the raw chorus of cicadas and the occasional low howl carried from miles off. Briar Hollow, a town too small for most maps, existed in a kind of stubborn quiet. Half its houses abandoned, the other half clinging to the edges of survival. People whispered more than they spoke, and secrets had a way of outliving those who kept them. Sheriff Dalton, broad-shouldered and carrying the weight of too many years on his back, wasn't one for ghost stories. But Jasper's behavior was making his jaw tighten. The dog's claws scraped at the rock, sending small showers of dirt tumbling. "Easy, boy," Dalton muttered, adjusting the brim of his hat. "Ain't nothing but a stone." But Jasper didn't stop. His paws tore furiously, whining low in his throat, as though he were fighting against something urgent, something hidden. Dalton sighed, crouched, and brushed away a layer of soil with his palm. The surface of the rock was strange. Too smooth in places, oddly pitted in others. He knocked on it with his knuckles. Hollow. The sound sent a chill up his arm. Behind him, headlights split the trees. A truck crunched over the dirt road, and Deputy Claire Rourke stepped out, her auburn hair tied back, her expression pinched. She was 30 years younger than Dalton and, in his eyes, already twice as cynical. "You call me out here for a dog digging at a rock?" she asked, tugging her jacket tighter. Dalton gestured. "It's not a damn rock." Claire crouched beside him, pressed her ear against the surface, then recoiled. "That's wood? Or metal? Underground storage, maybe. Doesn't fit the maps." This whole stretch was supposed to be untouched. Jasper barked once, sharp, demanding. The deputies exchanged a glance. In towns like Briar Hollow, things stayed buried for good reason. By the next morning, word had slipped out, not through Dalton or Claire, but through the back channels of small-town gossip. Mrs. Calloway's boy had seen the sheriff and his K9 in the woods, digging up some cursed relic. By the time Dalton arrived at the diner for coffee, half the room was buzzing with theories. "You heard about that?" muttered Tom Kinley, leaning over from the counter. Tom was the kind of man who wore suspicion like cologne, always sniffing after other people's sins to mask his own. Some say it's an old bootlegger stash. Others say worse. Dalton gave him a look that shut him up quick, but the whispers didn't stop. Claire slid into the booth across from him. She didn't bother with greetings. "I called in the county office. They're sending a forensics team tomorrow." Dalton stirred his coffee. "You shouldn't have done that. What do you expect me to do? Pretend it's nothing? Jasper doesn't act like that unless there's blood involved." The word hung heavy in the air. Blood. Dalton didn't answer. He just stared through the diner window at the fog curling over Briar Hollow like a blanket no one asked for. That night, the digging began. Not officially, not with equipment or permits. Dalton returned alone with only a shovel and Jasper at his side. He told himself it was about control. Better to see what lay under that false rock before outsiders turned it into spectacle. Each shovelful of soil smelled older, wetter, more rotten than the last. At 12 inches down, the sound changed. His shovel clanged against something hollow. He cleared the dirt faster, heart hammering. Jasper growled, low and primal. A wooden lid emerged, rotted at the edges, bound with iron bands rusted to flakes. Dalton brushed his sleeve across it, revealing a crude carving, a circle with 3 slashes through it. He froze. He'd seen that mark once before. Not on paper. Not in town. But carved into a tree the night his brother disappeared 30 years ago. The next day, county forensics arrived. 3 men in crisp jackets who looked out of place among the sagging porches of Briar Hollow. Dalton hovered while they pried the box free, mud sucking at its sides until it came loose with a gasp of air, as though the earth itself exhaled. The lid groaned open. Inside lay bones. Small, human, wrapped in what looked like strips of cloth that had fused into the remains. One of the men swore under his breath. Claire's face went pale. But Dalton's eyes locked not on the bones, but on the object nestled beneath them. A black book, swollen from damp, its leather cover scarred with the same 3-slash circle. "Bag it," one of the men ordered. Dalton's hand twitched. For a moment, he almost reached in himself, almost claimed it, but Jasper barked sharply, pulling him back. And that was when Dalton knew whatever they had unearthed wasn't just evidence. It was a message, and it was meant for him. Night fell heavy. Dalton sat on his porch, the black sky pressing close, the smell of rain promising another storm. Jasper lay at his feet, restless, eyes fixed on the tree lean. Claire pulled up, headlights washing over the porch, and joined him with a bottle of bourbon in hand. She didn't bother with glasses. "You're not telling me everything," she said quietly, after a long pull. Dalton didn't meet her eyes. "Some things are better buried. Not when they're children's bones." The words cut deep, and for a second Dalton hated her. Hated her for saying what he already knew. Then, from the woods, Jasper growled again. Not the warning of an animal sensing wildlife, but something sharper, angrier. Dalton stood. His voice was gravel. "They're not finished with us yet." The town of Briar Hollow carried its silences like heirlooms. That night, the silence weighed heavier than usual, broken only by Jasper's growl threading through the dark. Sheriff Dalton stepped down from his porch with the shotgun he hadn't carried in years. Claire shadowed him, flashlight in one hand, the bourbon still warming her throat. They didn't walk far, just to the tree lean. The dog pulled forward, hackles up, but the woods beyond seemed empty, too empty, as if even the crickets had fled. Claire whispered, "You ever seen him like this before?" Dalton's lips pressed tight. Jasper was no ordinary canine. He'd saved Dalton twice. Once from a meth cook with a sawed-off, once from a car wreck that should have taken his leg. The dog had instincts Dalton trusted more than most people. And now, those instincts screamed danger. They waited. Nothing came. Eventually, Jasper's hackles lowered, though his eyes stayed glued to the trees. Dalton exhaled and lowered the shotgun. But sleep never came that night. By morning, the story had spread. The bones, the box, the strange mark. In a town where people didn't lock doors but locked their hearts, rumors unlocked everything. Dalton found himself cornered outside the sheriff's office by Reverend Harlan, a man with 2 white teeth and sermons slicker than oil. "Brother Dalton," the Reverend began, clasping his arm with false warmth. "I hear the Lord has brought something terrible to light." Dalton pulled free. Funny how the Lord will sound a lot like gossip. But Harlan's eyes burned. Some secrets rot towns from the inside. Some must be exorcised. Dalton left him standing there, teeth still shining, words clinging like cobwebs. Inside, Claire was already poring over a spread of old county maps. Coffee ring stains smudging the paper. "This," she said, pointing to a shaded patch. "That's where we found it. But see here? Old survey lines. There used to be a settlement right in that clearing. Burned down in 42. Dalton's chest tightened. "I remember stories. My father used to talk about a fire. Said it was no accident." Claire raised a brow. "You think your father knew something?" He didn't answer. He was staring too hard at the maps. At noon, county forensics packed up. They'd shipped the bones to the lab, and the black ledger, the book, into evidence. Only Dalton noticed the way one of the techs slipped on gloves before touching it, as if it carried a disease. When the truck left, a sudden emptiness filled the air, like the woods themselves were waiting. Dalton returned to his office. Claire was already there, a stack of old newspaper clippings spread across her desk. "I pulled these from the archive." She pointed at a headline, "Tragedy Strikes Hollow Creek. Children Lost in Orphanage Fire." Dalton skimmed the article. 19 children dead. Cause of fire unknown. Below the photo of the burned husk of the building, Someone had carved the same 3-slash circle in ink. Not an editor, not a journalist, just someone. Claire's voice lowered. What the hell does it mean? Dalton didn't answer, because he already knew. That evening, Dalton took Jasper and drove alone to the clearing. The dirt still bore the wound of digging. The earth unsettled like a scar that hadn't closed. He crouched, touched the soil. It was cold, too cold for September. Jasper whined and began circling, nose pressed to the ground. He stopped at a second patch of disturbed earth a few feet away. He pawed once, then twice. Dalton's gut knotted. He dug with his hands until fingernails scraped wood again. Another box, smaller. He pulled until it gave way. Inside wasn't bone. Not this time. It was photographs. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of children, faces blurred by time and damp, all marked with the same circle scratched over their eyes. And at the bottom, one photo that stole Dalton's breath. His brother, 8 years old, smiling, a circle carved over both eyes. Dalton dropped the photo as though it burned. The woods went dead silent. Behind him, a twig snapped. He spun, shotgun raised, but there was no one there. Only the fog closing in thicker now, curling like smoke from fire that never ended. Back at the office, Dalton slammed the box of photographs onto the desk. Claire's eyes widened. She sifted through them, each one worse than the last. Where the hell did you? Don't ask, Dalton growled. Claire's hand stopped at the photo of his brother. She studied it, then looked up slowly. Dalton, why didn't you ever tell me he disappeared? His jaw worked. Because it was supposed to stay buried. She leaned forward. You think your family's tied to this? He didn't answer. Jesus, Dalton, she whispered. If you knew anything, you should have said something years ago. These are children. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Dalton saw the raw edge of grief in her. She'd never spoken of it, but he knew she'd lost a sister young. Car accident. The kind of scar that never faded. Now she looked at him like he betrayed not just her, but every name in those photographs. The betrayal only deepened that night. Dalton returned home late, Jasper restless, pacing. On his kitchen table sat the ledger. The same ledger County Forensics had taken. He hadn't brought it. He stared at it, throat dry, before opening the cover. The pages were filled with names, dates, transactions written in neat, deliberate script. The last column was labeled tithe. Every name had a mark beside it. Some had a single slash, others 3. And there, dated 30 years ago, was his brother's name, Ethan Dalton. 3 slashes. Dalton's hands trembled as he turned the page. The handwriting was the same as the one carved into box lid, the same looping script. And at the bottom, a signature. Harlan. Dalton's breath stopped. Reverend Harlan. He didn't sleep. At dawn, Claire banged on his door. Open up, Dalton. He hesitated, then let her in. She froze at the sight of the ledger on the table. You stole it. Dalton shook his head. I didn't. It showed up. She flipped pages, brow furrowing. Then she stopped cold at the name Ethan Dalton. Her voice softened. Your brother? Dalton whispered. He was taken. Same as those children. And Harlan signed it. Claire slammed the book shut. Then we take it straight to the DA. Now! Dalton shook his head slowly. No, not yet. Why the hell not? Because if we don't play this careful, we'll end up like them. Buried. The silence stretched. Then Claire asked a question she already knew the answer to. You're protecting him. Dalton's eyes lifted. Hard. Old. I'm protecting this town. You bring down Harlan. And Briar Hollow burns all over again. Claire's hand trembled on her holster. For a moment, she thought about drawing it, about ending this herself. But then Jasper barked sharply, breaking the tension. Dalton muttered, We wait. We watch. Claire whispered, or we become the same as him. And the distance between them became a canyon. That night, the church bell rang though no service was scheduled. The sound rolled through the hollow, deep and solemn, pulling townsfolk like moths to flame. Dalton went with them. Ledger tucked under his arm, Jasper at his side. Claire followed, though her trust had soured to suspicion. Inside the church, Reverend Harlan stood at the altar, smile radiant. Candles lit the pews, faces flickering in half-light. "My flock," he said, voice rolling smooth as silk. "Darkness has been unearthed among us. But remember, to purge sin, one must bring it into the light." Dalton felt the ledger heavy in his hands. His brother's name seared into his skull. Harlan's eyes found his, and in that gaze was no surprise, only recognition, like a man who'd been waiting 30 years for this moment. The church was too quiet. No creak of pews, no coughs from old parishioners, no shifting of restless children. Just a steady glow of candles throwing jagged shadows across Reverend Harlan's smile. Sheriff Dalton stood at the back, ledger under his arm. Jasper pressed at his side. Claire hovered a few steps away, her hand never straying far from her holster. Harlan raised his arms. "Brothers and sisters, a reckoning has come. But reckonings bring salvation. For too long, the sins of our fathers have poisoned Briar Hollow. Tonight, the ground itself gave them up." A murmur rippled through the congregation. Dalton recognized the faces. Shopkeepers, farmers, mothers with their children on their laps. None of them looked surprised. That was when Dalton realized the truth. The whole town already knew. Claire's voice cut sharp through the hush. "You kept records of every child you murdered." Gasps echoed, but Harlan didn't flinch. He only tilted his head, eyes sliding toward Dalton. "Murder, deputy? Or sacrifice? Those children were chosen long before you, and I walked this earth." Claire's hand brushed her gun. "Save your sermons." Dalton's pulse pounded. His throat felt raw, but he forced words out. "Ethan, my brother. You took him." Harlan's smile softened. "You don't understand, Dalton. You were meant to be taken too. But your father begged. He traded you for him." The room shifted, whispers swelling. Dalton staggered back as though struck. His father had known. Claire's eyes flicked to Dalton, wide with shock. "Is that true?" Dalton's chest heaved. He never told me. But deep inside he knew. He remembered the way his father had drunk himself silent, the way he never spoke Ethan's name again. Harlan spread his arms wider, voice rising with unholy fervor. "This town is built on blood. Every generation pays the tithe. And you, Sheriff, were supposed to carry the burden next." The congregation bowed their heads, as if in prayer. Not one protested. Claire whispered, horrified, "They're all in on it." Dalton lifted the ledger high. "Not anymore. This ends tonight." Harlan's voice dropped, calm and certain. "No, Dalton. Tonight it begins again." The candles flickered. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of damp earth. Jasper growled, teeth bared, pulling forward. From beneath the church floor came a sound, scratching, muffled, like nails clawing wood. The congregation didn't stir. They only whispered in unison, low and rhythmic. Words Dalton didn't recognize. Claire's gun was out now, trembling slightly. "Dalton, we need to get out. Now." But Dalton couldn't move. The ledger burned in his hand, the ink seeming to crawl across the page. He opened again, names bleeding into each other, letters shifting until one word stood out, freshly carved into the paper. "Dalton." 3 slashes. The floorboards cracked. A smell rose up, sulfur, rot, the sweet stink of decay. Jasper lunged forward, barking furiously, as splinters broke and a pale hand shot through the wood. Not bone, not flesh, something in between. Claire fired. The shot blew through wood and hand alike, but the whispers only grew louder. Dalton's instinct screamed. He grabbed Claire's arm and yanked her toward the doors. "Run." They barreled out into the night, Jasper bounding ahead. Behind them, the church erupted with shouts and prayers, Harlan's voice booming like thunder. The bell tolled on its own, hollow and endless. They didn't stop running until they reached Dalton's truck. Both doubled over, gasping. Jasper paced, barking toward the church as though urging them back. Claire slammed a fresh magazine into her pistol. "We have to end this." Burn that ledger. Burn the church. Dalton shook his head, staring at the book in his hand. If we burn it, we lose proof. They'll call us liars. Crazy. And Harlan walks free. Claire's eyes blazed. There are bones, Dalton. There are photographs. What more do you need? But Dalton's gaze was far away, on the trees, on memories of his brother's laugh. Proof wouldn't bring Ethan back. Proof wouldn't break the cycle. He looked down at Jasper, the dog staring up at him, unflinching, waiting. And Dalton made his choice. They returned at dawn. The church stood silent, its bell mute. No smoke, no congregation. Only stillness. Inside, the pews were empty. Candles melted to wax stumps. The altar bare, as if no one had ever been there at all. Dalton placed a ledger on the pulpit. The book seemed to vibrate against the wood, humming faintly. Claire whispered, "What are you doing?" Dalton struck a match. The flame caught fast, pages curling, blackening. The whispers rose again, furious, 100 voices hissing through the church walls. The ground trembled. Dalton held the book down until the fire consumed it whole. He didn't flinch as smoke stung his eyes. Jasper barked once, loud, defiant, and then silence, the kind that felt final. For weeks, Briar Hollow acted as though nothing had happened. The church remained locked, its bell rusting. Harlan vanished. Some said he fled. Others whispered he'd burned with the ledger. No one spoke of the bones. No one mentioned the photographs. Claire handed in her badge. "I can't serve a town that lets its children be buried." Her voice cracked as she said it, and Dalton didn't stop her. Dalton stayed. He walked the streets with Jasper at his side, the townsfolk lowering their eyes when he passed. He wasn't sheriff anymore. Not really. He was a relic, like the burned ledger, a reminder of what they chose to forget. But at night, when the fog rolled in and the cicadas quieted, Dalton swore he could still hear the church bell tolling far off. And sometimes Jasper would rise from his sleep, stand at the window, and growl into the dark. Dalton would sit with him, hand resting on the dog's fur, and whisper to the brother he couldn't save. "I kept my promise, Ethan. I ended it. You're free now." And though the town might never speak his name, though history might erase the truth, Dalton knew one thing. Legends weren't born from victories. They were carved from the scars left behind.